Hi green lovers, I just bought this absolutely gorgeous fuchsia plant from Costco, and I've never grown fuchsia before, so this is my first time, and I hear it can be a little bit finicky. So I'm gonna try to grow this, but before I do that, somebody recommended a brilliant idea that I take a few cuttings and try and propagate a few backup plants just in case this plant doesn't make it, so I've got some backups. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I'm going to be propagating this fuchsia plant. I read up all about it, never done it before, so we're going to learn together. But I'm also going to be propagating some lavender, and I'm going to be starting some ginger, and both those I have done successfully before. So let's get to it. Okay, so bring you up a little bit closer. Now they say that the best time that you should take cuttings for your fuchsia is either spring or fall, with spring being the better time to take it. And that's because this is growing at this point. There's a lot of growing shoots. So that's what we're going to look for. We're going to be looking for these growing shoots, and we're going to be snipping off maybe about 4 to 6 inch length cuttings from it. So I'm going to take a few. I want to take the cutting right under a node, because this is where the roots are going to be coming from. And we'll go ahead and take a few more of these. This one looks like a good one right here, right below the node. There we go. And a couple more. There. I don't want this plant to look like it's been chopped up, so I'll have to do this carefully. Okay, so I got 6 healthy cuttings. I think that's good enough for starters. Let's go ahead and propagate them. Okay, so I like to use these kinds of containers to propagate. For one thing, they are kind of transparent, and so I can actually sometimes even see the roots starting to form if the cutting is close enough to the edge. The other thing is they're actually nice and deep, and I like to push my cuttings pretty deep, because wherever you push it into the soil and wherever there are nodes, it starts to produce roots. And then the best thing about it is that it's got a lid that I can close, and that serves as a humidity dome. So that's one of the things about propagation, is most cuttings do require that warm sort of humid environment, and so these work really, really well. I'm going to be filling this up with something like either a seed starting mix or a potting mix. I like to use a seed starting mix because those tend to be sterile, and because I'm going to be doing this propagation indoors, there's less chance of fungal activity happening if the mix is pretty sterile. So that's what I'm going to be using to propagate my cuttings. Now I've got this big tub of seed starting mix. I make it in bulk. I use cocoa coir as my main ingredient. So I use 6 parts of cocoa coir to 2 parts of vermiculite to 1 part of perlite. So that is my recipe for seed starting mix. So let's go ahead and fill up our containers. Look at the texture of it. You can see the vermiculite and the perlite granules. And then if I squeeze this, I might be able to get a couple of drops of water coming out of it. So that really is the moisture level that you want to keep this at. You don't want it to be soaking soppy wet, and you also don't want it to be too dry. I'm going to fill this right up to the top, and I'm going to push it down, tamp it down just a little bit. You want the cutting stems to be in contact with the soil, so don't leave the soil too loose. You want to firm it up a little bit. That's good. I'll do the others, and then let's get back to rooting our cuttings. Okay, so first off, let's prep our cutting. Now, as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes, 4 or maybe even 5 nodes. And I think that's about a good length for a cutting. It's about maybe 6 inches or so long. And you want to strip the lower leaves, just like that. And then for the top leaves, I actually cut these down. Now remember that you want most of the energy that is remaining in this cutting to be sent into growing roots. And then the leaves just kind of help it along a little bit. So I strip off most of the leaves, and then the ones that are remaining, I kind of just chop them down. So that is a perfectly good looking cutting. And then what you want to do is, I use my nails. I just sort of use it to graze the surface of the bottom of the stem around this node and expose it. And now what you're going to be doing is you're going to be dipping this in some rooting hormone. Now I've got 2 kinds over here. I've got one which is the gel kind, that's called Clonex. I've got another which is the powder form That is also called rooting powder, and they are both pretty much the same active ingredient. This is just more convenient to use because I can just use my paintbrush to sort of paint it on, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So this is what you would do, is you just dip your paintbrush in it and just kind of paint on the stem. Now, these rooting hormones are optional, but they definitely make a difference. So you will get a higher rate of cutting set if you use a rooting hormone. That has just been my experience for the most part with most cuttings. So let's go ahead and plant this out. So I like to use a pencil to make a hole, because without that, as I push it in, the rooting hormone kind of gets wiped away. So I make a hole and then I just stick it into the hole and then I press the soil around it. And that really is all that it takes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the rest. But one other little tip is that when you actually plant this into the soil, rather than putting it directly straight into the soil, you can angle it. That way you'll have more of the stem under the surface of the soil, and more of the stem that's covered means more chances that it'll form roots. So that's what I'm going to do for the most part, because these cuttings are actually a little bit long and it's difficult for me to close the lid if they're kind of sticking vertical that way. So I'm going to angle them and push them into the soil. Oh, and you definitely want to remove any buds or flowers. You do not want them to be on your cutting. They will just suck all the energy out of your cutting. But gosh, just look at how gorgeous that blossom is. Such a pretty, pretty color. And even the buds, these huge buds are like balloons. It's got this fuchsia colored petals. I guess that's why it's called fuchsia. And then inside it's got this dark purple set of petals. Just such a pretty flower. And then when it opens up, it looks like this. So the purple gets a little lighter in color. But gosh, look at that. So I guess the fuchsia colored part is actually the calyx, is my guess. And the inside, that's the real flower. Okay, and we're all set. So all I'm going to do now is cover this up, and I'm going to put it under a heat lamp somewhere. And of course, I'm going to put a flower behind my ear. Isn't that cute? Oh, just kidding. I'm going to be doing the exact same thing for my lavender cuttings. I just went and cut this off of my lavender plant. Again, all the growing tips. And you want to strip, I'd say, about 2 to 3 inches off of the bottom. Same thing, do a little scrape here, a little scrape there. Get your cloning compound, purple colored cloning compound, and then just paint up the stem. Take your pencil and at an angle, make a hole, and then stick this in here. And then press it down because you want it to come in good contact with the soil. I actually would probably water it in just a little bit as well before I put it on top of my heat mat. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this, and then let's get to our ginger. So I noticed while I was doing this that I've actually got some cuttings that are from last year. You can see the blooms from last year. So I don't know how that's going to do, but we'll find out. I usually just use the fresh growing tips. We're going to find out. It's an experiment. Now, I know one of the questions that you're going to ask me is where I got my rooting hormone from. So this one, it's a rooting powder, same active ingredient as this other one. So they both have something called indole 3-butyric acid. That's the active ingredient. Same thing in both of these. This powder form is available in most big box stores. I live in the United States, so it's available in like Home Depot or Lowe's on the shelves. And this one I actually got from Amazon. And this is a little bit more expensive as well. And this gel form, I understand, does tend to deteriorate over time. It feels like it's better because I guess the gel has this sort of clinging property and sticks better to the roots. But again, same active ingredient. And I do store this in the refrigerator because I read somewhere that it lasts longer. So I've had this for about a year or so, and it still seems like it's working quite well. So yeah, that's where I got my rooting hormone from. Okay, so the last one, ginger. So ginger is really, really easy to start from your grocery store ginger. All you need to do is make sure that you buy an organic ginger, and that way you ensure that it's not been sprayed with some kind of growth inhibitor. But yeah, I just got this from the grocery store, and you want to cut it into pieces that are about 2 inches or so in size. Now what you want to make sure when you cut those pieces is that there is this sort of growth point over here. This is called an eye, and there needs to be at least 1 or 2 per little piece. So like in this piece, you've got 2 growth points. These little fingers, they actually have a growth point at each end, and this one has got one over here, and it's probably got another somewhere over here. So yeah, this is about the size, a couple of inches. You don't need to go much bigger than this, but you don't want to go too much smaller than this either, because remember, when the ginger is growing, until it actually establishes a decent amount of roots, it's actually pulling a lot of nutrition from this piece. So you want to make sure that you have at least a good couple of inches of healthy ginger that will support the growth of those initial shoots. And all you're going to do is the same thing like you did for those cuttings, is you're going to take it and bury it in some soil right under the surface, just like this. Press it down, and then you're going to put it on a warm mat in a humid area. So you're going to have this dome on top, and then when it starts to sprout, you take and transfer it to a bigger container. Oh, and as you put these into the soil, try your best to put it so that the growing tip is pointing upwards. It's not necessary. The plant will figure out a way to grow upwards, but if you can, if it's pretty obvious to you where the growing point is, then plant it with that point facing upward. Now know that ginger doesn't grow very, very deep. It actually grows horizontally. It kind of creeps and grows horizontally. So I have grown it successfully in the past in those kind of bus trays, which are no more than about 4 or 5 inches in height. But this year I'm going to do something different. I'm actually going to be growing it in pots for a couple of reasons. The pots have a lot of depth to them, and I actually want to fill up the bottom part of the pot with some good organic matter. So something like this mixed in with some soil, throw in some worms, etc. And I want to generate kind of like a fertilizer situation that is happening at the bottom of the pot, because what's going to happen is the ginger roots, even though the plant grows horizontally, the roots will reach down and get nutrition, and so they will reach into the decomposing material at the bottom of the pot, and they will get their fertilizer from there. I learned this tip from Robbie and Gary's Easy Gardening. I'll put a link to their channel, and I'll put a link to the video where she talks about how she does that, so that you can learn directly from the master. But I'm going to try that method this year and see whether that makes a difference, because ginger is a very hungry plant and it needs very nutritious soil. So let's go ahead and finish this planting of the ginger, and I will come back and show you updates as these things start to grow, so you have a general idea how long it takes. And I've done this in the past, and it's roughly about 2 weeks, I'd say, for both the lavender as well as for the ginger to develop a good set of roots. And I don't know about the fuchsia, and we're going to find that out. So I hope you learned something new from this video, folks. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you did learn something, and if you enjoyed the video, and please do share it around, because we want more people learning how to grow ginger and learning how to propagate plants. I hope you try it. It's such a rewarding experience. And until next time, live green and love your greens.